Last year, Alex brought you a first drive review of the second generation Kia Niro hybrid you see behind me. He's also now given you a full review on the plug-in hybrid and the electric version. But now that I've got my hands on the hybrid, I want to know, how does it stack up against its closest rival, the all-new Toyota Corolla Cross Hybrid? When he had his hands on this last year, we knew a few details, but now we know a lot more and we've driven it. So it's time to compare. How does this stack up against that model? Is it going to be a better value? Let's find out. Because the Niro is a dedicated hybrid, plug-in hybrid, and electric vehicle, it shares a lot of design cues with the rest of the Kia electrified lineup, including the new EV9, which we finally have a production version of, and the EV5 concept, which will preview another electric model with very similar designs up front. Now, I really like the fact that this is a clean and pretty modern look. These are not where the DRLs go, but this is a very similar design up top to what you see in the EV9 and the EV5. The actual headlights and the DRLs are over here on the side. On this top SX Touring, everything you see is LED. The DRL is LED, the lights in here are LEDs, and we also have LED fog lights down here. The Niro grew a little bit for its second generation, going up to 171.5 inches in overall length with a 106.3 inch wheelbase. Ride height is actually 6.3 inches compared to the Corolla Cross Hybrid's 8 inches, but keep in mind that that model has all-wheel drive, so you definitely won't be taking this off the beaten path like you might be able to a little bit easier in that Corolla Cross. Now, compared to the other models in the Kia lineup, this is a little bit longer than a Seltos, shorter than a Sportage, but this has more rear legroom than the Seltos, not as much as the Sportage. This cargo area is also not as big as a Sportage, but it's bigger than the Seltos, so it is right there in the middle in the lineup. These are the optional 18-inch wheels you'll find on the EX Touring trim and the SX Touring trim like I have here. They're wrapped in Continental Pro Contact RX 225/45 tires. Now onto my favorite angle of the Niro, that will be this rear end. It's heavily inspired by the Niro concept that previewed the new Niro, which it really previewed the entire design, but they really stuck to the concept look back here with these functional aero blades that actually have slots right here that allow air to pass through from the side all the way back here. That increases aerodynamic efficiency as well as fuel economy. But at the same time, they also use that element to design the taillights, which have this sort of boomerang shape to them. This vertical look reminds me a lot of previous generation Honda CR-Vs, Volvos, and Cadillac Escalades. I really like that look. We do have a rear wiper blade that is standard on all models. Of course, I wish they could have cleaned things up and tucked it up here, but this is not a super expensive vehicle. On this top trim, all the lights back here are LEDs, including the turn signals, which are down in the bumper. And if you have to complain about that, ask yourself, am I too close to the car if I can't see the bumper? Driver's Ed 101, people. All right, then once you open the optional power tailgate, you are greeted with a pretty sizable cargo area, but not as sizable as you might think once you sit in the second row. There had to be some compromises there to give the second row a lot of space. Back here is where those were made. Standard active safety features include automatic emergency braking with pedestrian detection, a blind spot monitor, rear cross traffic alert, lane keeping assist, lane departure warning, and lane follow assist, a traffic sign recognition system, a driver attention monitor, a rear occupancy alert, and a safe exit assist system. Optional equipment includes adaptive cruise control, highway drive assist 1, which means you don't get the automated lane changes, but you get just about everything else, and front and rear parking sensors. Under this hood is the same hybrid system you'll find in the Hyundai Elantra hybrid. It's a naturally aspirated 1.6-liter four-cylinder that makes 104 horsepower and 109 pound-feet of torque, paired to a 43 horsepower electric motor. Now, all of that's happening up front because this is front-wheel drive only. There is no all-wheel drive option with a rear electric motor like the Corolla Cross Hybrid, which means total system horsepower is way lower than that hybrid. We have 139 total here, 196 total in the Corolla, but its EPA rating for combined fuel economy is way lower, 42 versus 49 here. And with an 11.1 gallon fuel tank, you should expect to be able to go 500 miles or more between fill-ups. Now, the one interesting change between this and the larger Hyundai Kia hybrids is the fact that we have a 6-speed dual-clutch automatic transmission as opposed to those cars' 6-speed traditional automatic transmission. Apparently that was done to really hyper-focus on efficiency and give you that more traditional, maybe perhaps sportier feel. You definitely feel the shifts in this more abruptly than you would in that traditional automatic transmission or a CVT. I'm going to give front seat comfort a 7 out of 10, and the reasons are the fact that the seats, they lack a little bit of lateral support. There's not too much bolstering going on. If you are a larger adult, you might find these to be perfect, but I preferred the seats in the Corolla Cross Hybrid. They just held me in place a little bit better than this. And the other reason that I'm giving this a 7 out of 10 is the fact that though we do have a commanding view of the road and really good visibility out of the front and the sides, the downside of that is the fact that Kia made the dashboard pretty low in terms of the screens where they are located. I'm so used to modern cars having screens higher up on the dashboard so you don't have to look down at them. Here in this car, I do feel like I'm always having to look down at the screen, which, you know, it's further away than I want to be looking from the road if I need to be looking at the screen. So not a big deal, but something to consider if you are comparing this to that Corolla Cross or even other Kia models that have that more, you know, modern tablet style look. Aside from that though, on this SX Touring trim, we have 8-way power adjustable seats with 2-way lumbar support on this side, but only manually adjustable seats on this side, just slide and tilt and that's it. But they are heated and ventilated on the SX Touring, and we also have a heated steering wheel with a pretty decent range of motion. Unlike Toyota's newer products with that interesting LCD instrument cluster up high, this one allows you to see it right through the steering wheel, and you can see all of it just fine, so that's good. And the last thing I'll point out is the fact that the driver on this trim has 2-person memory seat settings. Now the back seat is where it's at. This is much roomier than the Corolla Cross Hybrid, even though I can't give you a direct comparison because even Toyota doesn't even know the exact figure for legroom on that model just yet, so stay tuned. We'll try to get you that number as soon as they have it, but this is roomier than a RAV4. The back seat has more legroom than a RAV4, so you can bet that it's gonna have more room than the Corolla Cross, and you definitely feel that, and on camera, I'm sure it shows up as well, because this is where I was sitting before. I have about 5 to 6 inches of knee room left, 5 to 6 inches of headroom thanks to the fact that we don't have a panoramic moonroof, so the ceiling actually, you know, juts up a little bit up here, giving you a little bit more space. I would say if you're over 6 feet tall, it could start to get cramped, but long-legged folks are gonna be really, really comfortable back here. We have these sort of hard style pockets in the seat back. The entire back of the seat is a hard plastic, and it has this element right here that allows you to hang shirts and things over it. That's an interesting design thing that Kia has been doing recently. Let me know what you think of that, because it makes the headrest shoot forward a little bit. It's good for head support for the driver, but it just looks kind of funny to me. We also have USB ports on the doors as well. This is a Hyundai Kia thing that they've been doing for a while now. They are both USB-Cs, and on all trims, thank you very much Kia, we have air vents. That is a really unique feature in the segment. Usually you don't get that unless you go to the very top level of the trim structure. Here you can find it in every single Niro hybrid. Back here you'll find 22.8 cubic feet of space. That's better than the Corolla Cross Hybrid's 21.5 cubic feet, but there is a Corolla Cross version that has more. That would be a front-wheel drive non-hybrid version. Those have 24 cubic feet of space back here, but that's giving up the efficiency of the hybrid system. So if you're comparing apples to apples, the Niro Hybrid has more space than the Corolla Cross Hybrid. Under the load floor, you'll find a tiny bit of extra space around the foam divider thing right here that contains the Fix-A-Flat kit and all those similar items, but this top trim has the Harman Kardon stereo, and its subwoofer is right here behind that, and you can't remove it unless you want to remove the sub from the sound system, which I don't recommend. So if you want to put your own compact spare, you could probably remove this in a lower trim level and then put one yourself. But if you want to keep that stereo system in a top trim, you're not going to be able to put a spare tire back here. Then to fold the second row seats down, you do have to come around here to the second row to do that because there are no levers back here. But once you do, you have 63.7 cubic feet of space. That's more than the Kia Seltos and more than the Corolla Cross Hybrid. Upper trims feature this power tilt and slide moonroof. It is a standard size though, no panoramic option available. Here's a closer look at that seat design with that sort of trumpet horn shape to the headrest. We also have the typical height adjustable seatbelt over there on the B-pillar. This is the charcoal interior color. There is a two-tone light gray with charcoal, but this is all charcoal. And it gives you this interesting pattern here in the seat design. I think it looks pretty interesting. And of course, it's got perforation because these are ventilated seats. I really like what Kia did with the door design, giving it this sort of diagonal line that connects all the way up to the dashboard. We've got the silver trim for the door handle, which connects into that sort of Nike swoosh right there. All the materials are definitely hard plastic. The only soft area is going to be right here where you rest your arm. It's a nice fabric material with a good bit of cushioning. That cut line continues up to the dashboard all the way to the back where the windshield starts, bringing your eye to this really interesting dashboard design. Now, because the materials aren't the highest quality, they made this at least visually interesting to make up for that. Up top, we have this golf ball pattern to this upper section. It does have a little bit of squish to it, not too much, but of course you're not going to be touching that. Down here, we have all black plastic, but they give it that interesting 4 parallel line ambient lighting setup right there, which you can see that's purple right now. At night, it looks very cool, but then everything below that becomes hard plastic. To be expected, but as we open the glove box here, you'll note that it is pretty decently sized. You could definitely fit a tablet computer in there. The dashboard is very reminiscent of the Kia EV6. This is just a smaller version of that. We've got the smaller 10.25-inch LCD instrument cluster. You know, they could have done a little bit better job filling out all these bezels, but I do like the intricate shape of it. It does look very cool and very modern. We have that same dual function panel down here. It's all touch buttons with 2 knobs. And I know people complain about this, but as a driver having it for a week, I got used to it. And you know what? If you're in a situation where you need to turn the volume down really quickly and you're already on this panel and you don't want to have to press this and then turn the knob, remember you have the button on the steering wheel that immediately mutes the audio. So there are workarounds for those typical situations where people find this to be a little bit cumbersome. You can definitely figure out a way to work around it, and you certainly will as an owner of this car. So I wouldn't put this on the top of the reasons why you might not want this car. This is something you can definitely figure out. Just beneath that panel, you'll find a 12-volt outlet right here, a USB port for Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, and a USB-C charge-only port. Below that is a wireless charge mat where you can put a Pixel 6 Pro size smartphone in there, no problem. It's rubberized, so the phone will not roll around and make a lot of racket while you are driving. The rest of the center stack is covered in piano black plastic, so if you have OCD, you are going to be very annoyed by the scratches and fingerprints. This car already has quite a few of them, all right concentrated around the start button. So apparently a lot of people just like rub their fingers across this to get to this button. I do like the placement of this button, but you know, it's far enough away from the cup holders that you shouldn't worry about spilling things up here. Down here we have buttons for your ventilated seats, your heated steering wheel, auto brake hold. Your electronic parking brake is right here. This is your traditional style shifter. You don't have that rotary style you'll find on the Niro EV. Let me know which one of those you prefer. Do you like the rotary, or do you prefer to have something you can really rest your hand on? Right here we have the button to disengage or engage the parking sensors, and right here you can turn on the rear view camera if you are in park. In order to maximize space and flexibility, Hyundai and Kia have been implementing these ejectable cup holders. So you push the button, they pop out right there, and they're perfectly sized to fit, you know, a cup of Starbucks coffee or even a large water bottle. But the nice thing about that is if you don't want to put any cup holders there, or if you don't want cups to go there, if you don't have cups to go there, and you want to store, you know, other different shaped items here, you can move those out of the way and utilize all of that cargo volume, if you will. I'm going to call it cargo volume because you can call that cargo, right? Then upon opening the very squishy center armrest cover right here, you'll find there's a divider between that space up here and the space back here. It's not a gigantic amount of space, but if you want to put longer items like, you know, a 12-inch Subway sandwich, you could actually pull this wall out and fit that right in there just like that. I think that's a really genius way to increase flexibility, allow you to put more items and not be restricted by things that are just cup holders or things that are just storage areas. You can make it all one big storage area if you want to. Over here on the left, we have controls for your adaptive cruise control. On the right, we have controls for your audio system and your voice control, and the drive mode button is right here. There are actually only 2 drive modes. I push that once, you'll go into sport, push it again, and you go back to eco. There is no normal, there's nothing else. There's just those 2 options, so you're either being efficient or you're being sporty. You can only go those ways. Behind that we have paddle shifters. These don't shift the 6-speed dual clutch, they actually do the regenerative braking duties. So if you hold down this left one, you'll actually get temporary full regen. So you can, just like with the Ioniq 5 and the EV6, you could hold this paddle down and come to a complete stop, and it is pretty strong regen even for a standard hybrid system. Behind the steering wheel is what I'm calling a partial LCD instrument cluster. You'll find the true 10.25-inch LCD instrument cluster available only on the Niro EV. Both the hybrid and the plug-in hybrid are only going to get this or even a smaller setup on the lower trims. So this portion on the left is actually fixed, as is the portion on the right. You're always going to have that digital speedometer, digital tachometer. It's what's in the center that actually changes. So I can shuffle through different screens there. There are 4 main landing pages. So you've got your adaptive cruise control, you've got your vehicle status, so that's going to show us what the car is doing in the hybrid system in terms of, you know, where the power is going, or if the engine, like it is right now, is charging the battery. You can shuffle up and down through your fuel economy information. And then this page over here has your compass, and finally your engine temperature. This is going to give you some more status information on the vehicle itself. So not too much going on there, but it does look more interesting than a traditional instrument cluster. But again, if you want the full-fledged 10.25-inch all LCD instrument cluster with the configurable gauges, where, well, they're not configurable, but they can be changed in terms of their themes, you're going to have to go for the EV. Here's a closer look at that door design again. Really interesting how they make it sort of triangular and very flowing. It just fits the interior so well. It all wraps around, goes all the way across the dashboard. You could kind of see how that line connects to this line. It's just a very interesting design. Kia did go above and beyond to make this a visually interesting design. Up there you'll find the buttons for your two-person memory seat settings and then your door controls here. The front two windows are automatic up-down, the rear two are not. Getting the Niro out on the road, the first thing I want to talk about are these regen paddles. Now, not only are they regen paddles, as I said earlier, they're also paddles to shift the 6-speed dual clutch automatic. If I shift this over into the manual mode on the lever, then they become the shift paddles. And there are obviously 6 full fixed gear ratios that I can choose from. Now, when you press on the paddle, the responsiveness does vary depending on your situation, but once the transmission is ready to shift, it's very crisp as you'd expect from a 6-speed dual clutch transmission. So it's very traditional car-like in terms of the actual feel, but if you like that, you'll really like the Niro. If you want a smoother, more hybrid-like experience, you'll definitely want to look at another hybrid, because there are plenty of other hybrid systems out there that implement CVTs or planetary gear sets that will be smoother than what you experience here in the Niro. Now, when you do have this back in the normal drive mode and these are acting like regen paddles, they're very similar to what you'll find in the electric portfolio at Hyundai, Kia, and Genesis. They have 3 different levels of regen, but they don't have the iPedal mode. That's the ability to not have to use your brake pedal. The one thing you can do that's very similar, however, is hold down the left paddle. Once you do that, that gives you a temporary max regen setting, so you could theoretically, use that left paddle to come to a complete stop. So I'm going to start now. I'm using the left paddle. It's doing the most regen it can provide at the current moment. It's not iPedal quick in terms of how fast it's stopping me, but it will bring you to a complete stop. And combined with the auto brake hold, it is a really nice setup. You could theoretically drive around this thing without ever using the gas pedal, or the brake pedal. Now, when the paddles are back in the regen mode, they do a lot of the same things that Hyundai and Kia's electric models do. So you have 3 levels of regen you can shuffle through, but you don't have the full iPedal mode. There is no ability to just use the regen as your brakes. However, the closest thing we do have to that is the ability to hold down this left paddle over here. That gives you max regen for a short period of time, or as long as you feel like holding the paddle down, and that will bring you to a complete stop. So if I were to do that really quickly right here, I'm going to take my foot off the pedal, and now I'm only holding down this left paddle. It's not stopping me as quickly as iPedal mode would, but it brought me to a complete stop. And in combination with the auto brake hold, you could theoretically drive this car around and never use the brake pedal. Now, when it comes to that automatic mode, that is pretty neat, because what it does is uses the sensors for the adaptive cruise control to determine the space between you and the next car in front of you, and that will adjust the regen accordingly. So if there is a car right in front of me like there is now, it's going to increase the regen, so if I let my foot off the brake, it will actually keep me a comfortable distance away from that car. If there is not a car in front of me, it will pretty much bring the regen down to 0. Now that the sun is out and it's like 80 degrees here in Detroit, I thought that my acceleration times would be really, really good in this thing compared to what Kia's official estimates were, but unfortunately, I wasn't even able to get anywhere near the estimate. I only was able to get 9.5 seconds in this car. That's only about 3/10 of a second faster than the Nissan Kicks I just had, but I guess keep in mind, this is a heavier hybrid that's hyper-focused on efficiency, and it's a much bigger car, so it does make a little bit of sense considering the mission of the vehicle, but 9.5 seconds is pretty slow in today's age. Braking, on the other hand, was surprising in a more positive way. It actually took me only 115 feet to go from 60 miles per hour back to 0. The brake pedal itself feels very natural, it's very predictable, you don't feel any of the regen or the physical brake transition. There's just nothing out of the ordinary about the brake feel. However, they do feel more powerful the higher speed you're at. So if you're up at highway speeds and you need to slam on the brakes, they feel very, very powerful, like they did in my 60 to 0 test. But if you're at around town speeds and you think you've got enough pressure on the pedal to get you comfortably to a stop and you're not relying on the regen, sometimes you do at the last second have to push a little bit harder because the brakes aren't doing as much work as you initially thought. So that is something I've noticed, but again, I like to use the regen. It's more fun. This is not a car that likes to be pushed too hard into a corner. It's definitely got some heft to it. Even though we have an independent rear suspension, if you throw this into a corner, the rear end does get a little bit disheveled, which is a little bit surprising to me considering that suspension setup and the fact that we have a slightly lower center of gravity than, something without a battery or a hybrid system, but alas, that was just not the mission of this car. Steering feel is pretty non-existent, but that's expected. However, the weight is not exactly feather light, so on higher speed, gentle curves, this actually is a little bit more engaging than I was expecting. And that's a good thing because this is a car you can drive very far, over 500 miles on a fill-up, so if you're on those long highway drives, this is a really nice place to be. As someone who never drove the first generation Niro, I think this is right where it needs to be. It's not floaty or squishy, but it's not brittle over rough pavement, so I think it's right where it needs to be. I measured only 53 decibels in here, and that is really quiet considering the competitive set, and it's probably a little bit quieter than that new Toyota Prius, even though that has a much more aerodynamic shape than this. We'll have to get that back home and test it ourselves to find out for sure, but at the moment, this feels quieter than the Prius. Fuel economy then, of course, is the Niro's best attribute. Yes, this is slow, yes, it is heavy, and yes, it's a little soft, but damn if it isn't a fuel miser. I got 50.9 miles per gallon in my test loop. Would it be nice if Kia offered an all-wheel drive version of this hybrid setup with an electric motor in the back that got, mid to high 40s in terms of miles per gallon combined? Yeah, that would be really nice. And if Toyota can do that with the Prius, why couldn't Kia do it with a Niro? It makes more sense with a car sized and shaped like this. This would literally be the perfect Corolla Cross competitor if they offered that, but alas, the Corolla Cross comes standard with all-wheel drive, and you will not find all-wheel drive at all on any Niro. But keeping its size and shape in consideration, it really is quite impressive that Kia was able to pull off near Prius level efficiency in a car that is much more practical. They really didn't skip out on efficiency or utility in this model, which is why I think the Niro is really an excellent choice. But you will have to ask yourself, how badly do you need that all-wheel drive? So what have we learned about the Niro Hybrid? Well, it really is the MPG king of the hill. If you want to get around 50 miles per gallon in real-world driving in a small, easy-to-drive package that can still fit adults comfortably, you really can't do much better than the Niro in 2023. Kia also offers a plug-in hybrid and a full electric model too, so you have a wide bandwidth of choices if you're trying to save fuel or delete fuel from your lifestyle altogether. Kia has always offered the Niro as a hybrid, a plug-in hybrid, and a fully electric model. That is not something you can say about the Prius, which has only ever been available as a regular hybrid or a plug-in hybrid. So in that regard, the Niro can really cover a full bandwidth of needs and lifestyles for customers who are trying to save fuel consumption or completely get rid of it. And on the outside, Kia really did a good job of sharpening up the design of the Niro for the second generation. It really looks quite futuristic in some ways, but also just more attractive than it did before, and it has some design elements that are both stylish and functional, like that arrow blade. When you get into the inside, you're met with a really modern-looking interior that has a nice balance between futuristic design and materials and fit and finish. Yes, this is built to a price point, but Kia did a really good job designing it to look a lot more expensive than it is in an effort to make sure you forget that, yeah, some of the pieces are just, glossy plastic or hard plastic. Step into the back seat and you'll find a space that is more roomy in some dimensions than a Toyota RAV4. So if you're looking for something with a smaller footprint that can still fit adults of most sizes comfortably, the Niro is a perfect choice. One thing that the Niro does that most other hybrids don't is allow you to engage with the regenerative braking and actually adjust how much you're getting. Most hybrids don't really even allow you to change that at all. The Niro allows you to use the paddle shifters on the wheel to adjust that, but they also serve as another function. They also shift the 6-speed dual clutch transmission in sport mode or even in the eco drive mode. So if you want to engage with the transmission, you can do that as well. It really does give you the best of both worlds that most other hybrids do not. Now, one thing that could be construed as a positive or a negative depending on who you are is the fact that the Niro has a really SUV-like driving position even though we're close to the ground in a small crossover. And the reason I say this as a sort of, not as much of a positive as it is a negative is because I personally didn't like that I had to look down at the dashboard like I'm in some large high-up SUV. The Niro felt like it was a little bit more old school in that way because most cars now put the tablet displays up higher than they do in the Niro. So it was just somewhat of a departure from what I'm used to. Of course, you might like it the way it is in the Niro. I'm just pointing it out as something that I noticed. The biggest crutch in the Niro side, however, is the fact that it doesn't offer all-wheel drive. That is definitely going to deter some shoppers and push them to go towards the Corolla Cross Hybrid or even the Prius because both of those come with all-wheel drive. And finally, the Niro is actually slower than a Prius. And that is a sentence no one ever thought they would ever say, but now we're living in a world where the Prius has nearly 200 horsepower and can get to 60 miles per hour in the 7 to 8 second range. The Niro is a good bit slower than that and has way less power. Finding direct competitors for the Niro hybrid in 2023 is a little bit trickier than it has been in the past, and that's simply because there aren't as many low-cost hybrid options out there like there used to be. For example, Honda no longer sells the Insight, again, and Subaru no longer sells a Crosstrek hybrid or plug-in hybrid, again. Maybe those will be coming back in the coming years, but for right now, we just have the options on your screen. That's the Toyota Corolla Cross Hybrid, the Elantra Hybrid, and the Prius. The closest competitor will obviously be the Corolla Cross Hybrid because it is also a small crossover. However, even though it has a higher base price, it comes standard with all-wheel drive, a higher ground clearance, more cargo capacity, and way more power, 196 horsepower. So that price difference is definitely made up with all of those attributes. Now, the most interesting part is the fact that the Corolla Cross comes in below the Niro fully loaded. Yes, you're getting a slightly older interior, but the exterior design is just as stylish as the Niro in a different way. You can get two-tone paints and things like that, but the tech on the inside is going to be very similar. The active safety features, very similar. It really comes down to the fact that the Niro is maybe a little bit more expensive feeling on the inside or expensive looking. I'm not exactly sure how the Niro came out much higher than the Corolla Cross like it did without the all-wheel drive and without the power. The value really starts to diminish there when you do look at that Corolla Cross pricing. But then you go back to the Elantra Hybrid, which is the same powertrain you'll find in the Niro Hybrid. It comes in at only $25,665, and that is a really good deal for what you're getting out of that car. But even fully loaded, it's only $30,715, and it's going to have most, if not all, of the same equipment you can get on that top-level Niro. Of course, you will lose out on practicality because it is a traditional sedan, but that sedan shape will help it with fuel economy as well. You can probably expect to see well into the 50 mile per gallon range instead of just right around 50 like I saw with the Niro. And finally, the new Prius, which shocked the industry last year with its bold redesign. It's going to come down to, do you need the all-wheel drive, and do you prefer that wedged liftback shape that it has? I actually really love the Prius design, but the Niro is really good looking as well. So that will come down to personal needs and preferences, but it won't be as practical as the Niro or the Corolla Cross Hybrid because it had a more design and aerodynamic focused design. So cargo practicality is just not as good as it used to be with the Prius, but efficiency is just as good as the Niro, actually probably better, even with all-wheel drive in the real world. We haven't tested one at home just yet, so stay tuned for that. We will definitely get you some numbers on that when we can, but in general, on paper, the Prius puts up a really good fight with the Niro because, again, it also offers more standard horsepower, 194 horsepower. It really comes down to, do you like the design of the Niro more? Do you like the fact that its interior may be a little bit more modern looking than the Prius? The Prius is all new and has a much better interior than it did before, but I think the Niro's is a little bit cooler looking. It just doesn't offer some of the same capability as any of these models. Well, not the Elantra, but either of the Toyota models. So let me know what you think about all that in the comment section below. Which one of these would you go with? Would you go with the Prius over the Niro, or would you go with the Corolla Cross Hybrid over the Niro? Let me know what you think, and make sure to like this video if you are a fan of inexpensive hybrids and you wish there were more of them out there, and subscribe to the channel if you are a fan of in-depth car reviews like this one. Follow us on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and Twitter. We've also got Auto Buyer's Guide podcasts and EV Buyer's Guide right here on YouTube, as well as the Alex on Auto's website for all the written reviews. Until I see you guys next time, thanks for watching, and we'll see you later.